welcome.
Hello, hi.
The first
hello.
question is always, who are you and where are you now?
So I'm Anthony Turi. I am a Gestalt psychotherapist, and I am sitting opposite you, Alexandra, on a Saturday afternoon here in North London in January, and I'm feeling really pleased to be here with you.
I share that feeling. How would you describe yourself as a person, as a human?
Well, going in there with a
The
strong opening. Yeah, I like it. How would I describe myself? I would describe myself as expansive. I'd like to start broadly and say there are certain Buddhist descriptions of the self as seeing oneself as the sky, and states within that as cloud and weather are just different aspects of oneself. But I like to try and have as broad a definition of myself as possible. So as somebody who's interested in humaning as much as possible. How's that?
What does that mean, actually?
It means, I guess I'll start to bring in the Gestalt theory. I'm really interested in being as connected to all the different aspects of myself as possible. I'm interested in myself as a soul, myself as a person, myself as a person with emotional life, as a body, as someone who loves music, who likes contact. That's what I'm in that ballpark. Yeah.
And I'm curious, you mentioned the word expansive, and then in the light of polarities, was there a time where you actually felt contracted?
Yeah. This morning. I think these polarities are always present, and that feeling of contraction as a bodily state and expansion, they're things I think, well, in my experience, I think we all do, but in my experience, I slide in and out of all the time. So I think I like to hold the idea of being expansive because I know I can contract as well.
And what do you think are some values that you hold as you are expanding?
Values. A deep respect for the human experience. Again, in the broadest possible sense. A deep respect for, in my experience, the fact that I'm a soul in a body and I'm engaging with other soulful bodies. A value on the emphasis on a deep respect for how each of us experiences the world from within. And a real value for me is a sense of interconnectedness. That really feels important to say. A sense of, I place a value on the resonance that happens between people and the wider world through resonance.
And I'm curious, how do you hold the polarities gently to create resonance or to hold dissonance?
Well, I guess, bringing it down to therapeutic work in my work as a Gestalt therapist, or in my work as a human being living on this planet, I think it's about befriending and holding the polarities within myself. And if I can do that, then I can
That's a
meet and hold
tricky
the
one.
polarities in another. What's your take on it, Alexandra?
I just said that's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. Very similar, almost the same. That I guess the polarity I cannot hold in myself somehow always is reflected in my surrounding, where I kind of project that polarity which I cannot hold. So I guess I once described to my therapist I would like to pick up all those projections and bring them back home. And I guess that's where the expansiveness comes. Being expansive enough to hold the rageful me, the funny me, the sad, sorrowful. Yeah. And I think it's, as I am seeing it, it's something, it's a lifelong journey to develop that nurturing, holding, mothering, fathering presence. Yeah.
It's lovely. Yeah.
On the mothering, fathering side, I'm curious, what are the people that have shaped you to be who you are today?
Yeah, so I guess you're reaching into the question of big influences for me. So, I mean, sure, my family of origin as an Italian boy growing up in London, and constantly having this reference point of Italy, but being in England. So my Italian ancestors are there, and they're with me all the time. In terms of beyond my family, though, as well, I think the biggest influences on me have been musicians and singer-songwriters. Those are the, experientially, those are the people who have shaped me and my world the most, I'd say.
How do you think, what is it that is speaking to you when you're in contact with singers, songwriters and their work?
How long have you got? It's great. We were talking about how long this interview would be.
Yeah.
If what is speaking to me from singer-songwriters and musicians? Firstly, and this is the point I would definitely make about the affinity between the power of music and the power of Gestalt therapy, is that there is an immediate somatic impact and a resonance when you connect with, or when a piece of music impacts you. Well, when it impacts me, it's like boom, it's there. It's not something that's thought about. It's right. It goes right into me, and I'm feeling it internally. And that's the same thing that can and often does happen in a therapy session.
Yeah.
I'm looking to feel into that felt sense of resonance with the other. It's like, boom, wow, okay, there you are. And this is me reacting to you in the same way that a piece of music just hits me. So that somatic, soulful sense of here's you and here's me and wow. And the boundaries are dissolving, and also I'm experiencing you fully as a separate thing. I mean, that's what really happens to me.
Yeah. Sorry to stop your train of thought, but there was something about the way you hold yourself when and allowing that impact, and this is something, that permissiveness that I observed in you as we were speaking even before the interview, is something that helps me to feel felt.
Wow.
So thank you.
This is a lovely moment right now.
Yeah.
I feel we're we're in that place.
Yeah.
And I feel I'm feeling you, feeling me, feeling you, feeling me, and there's a lovely dyadic connection here, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm left with the curiosity of the Italian boy in London, and how was that permissiveness always there, or was there something that you needed to peel off?
Permissiveness in the sense of
allowing impact of the other and of music or the music of other soul.
That's a great question. I'm going to feel into it. I think that the main theme as an Italian boy growing up in London was this sense of internally carrying and having access to another world. So it's like, okay, here I am, and I'm in England, and I'm going around my daily life, and I'm absorbing this, but there's also this other sense within me of something other, which I wasn't always fully aware of. But I mean, it was said that when people would come to my house when I was growing up, it was like, oh, stepping into Italy here. You know, the feel, the smells are different. But in terms of that permissiveness, there was sometimes I think for me, a shuttling between a shutting down and an opening up. So it's like, okay, I'm back from... No, let me do it the other way. When we went to Italy, and still now when I go, and Naples is the nearest airport, which is still quite far away from the village, but Naples is the nearest airport, and the door opens, and I just have that moment of, whoa, heat and light, that Italian Mediterranean light, and viscerally I feel that sense of, whoa, oh yeah, there you are. And it's like that. I think in that moment the permission to feel into that becomes reawakened for me, and there was nothing cognitive about it. It was visceral, and maybe we'll get onto that, but that's one of the appeals of Gestalt for me, of that visceral sense of wow. And then there were also times of coming back from Italy, or coming back from visiting my relatives in other countries, of like, okay, I'm gonna have to box that up now for a little bit. Okay. But that sense of, oh, there's another way to be and another way to feel, that opened up to the possibility of permissiveness. If I think I'm answering your question, I think permissiveness is something that one comes in and out of.
Yes.
I think, well, I do in my experience. Yeah.
And it's something that stuck with me, or that I kind of resonated with, was...
Tell me more.
Was that that place that you kind of box it out, and the coexistence is sometimes somewhat difficult.
Oh yeah.
Almost as if sometimes it feels like one excludes the other, and then that's where I feel like I'm talking about my experience, but holding the polarity of how can these be both present, as I am in England and in Serbia, because sometimes it happens I forget it's there, and it needs nourishment and it needs food, and then I need to go back to re-feel it. It's like, oh wow, I really needed this, and I didn't give it enough space. So I guess where I would ask a question here is, how can you give it enough space here in London?
I like that image very much of you going back to the well.
Yes.
Yeah. How can I give it enough space? I think I'd go more... I think to answer that question, I'd go more broadly. And I'd say it's about something beyond just my connection to my Italianness. It's about a connection to something beyond. And there's two ways to come at that. One is, because I think that connection to my Italianness was the connection to something beyond, greater than. And I feel a certain resonance with that part of me with others who aren't Italian, who aren't English. I'm feeling it with you now, Alexandra. And so in terms of maintaining that connection, it's about fostering that innate sense of connection between myself as I am now and that broader sense of me. I think it's Theodore Zeldin in An Intimate History of Humanity who talks about, increasingly we're all immigrants. We're all increasingly diverse, So it's finding that resonance in another, and it's fostering that sense for me, which for me is partly a spiritual one, of a connection to something beyond. And then I'd cycle back to music again, of that very clear sense of a connection to something other. So in a similar way that I tuned into my Italianness, I think the best way to describe it is the way Bruce Springsteen described hearing rock and roll on the radio when he was growing up. And he grew up in a Italian, Irish, American household, and he'd hear the music coming out of the radio, and it was like a message to him viscerally. He was saying, and he's described it as, "Hey, little boy, there's a whole world out here, and it's beyond what you can feel right now, and it's available for you." And I think music, in a spiritual sense, is how I refresh, as well as staying connected to Italian stuff.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting what you said, that it's beyond the Italianness, because that's how I feel. I feel like when I went to Portugal, it was present, and then I realized that there is something about the presence of sun as well, connection to the earth, and to just like just natural cycles that often I forget here in the haze of running in the underground, and yeah. So I guess and another thing that came to me as you were speaking was we're all immigrants. I wasn't as aware until I came to London, but we were immigrants. I guess we were always immigrants. It's just that there are these constructs of countries. But only when I came to London, I realized how much it is a construct. Because even as I came here, started dancing dances from my region, from the Balkans, and I realized what will be called Serbian was suddenly being danced in Greece and Bulgaria without my knowing. Yeah. And also starting to meet people here who are from the African countries, which are like, not something I would expect, and I don't want this to be considered wrongly, but like a completely white person say, "Oh, I'm born in Zimbabwe." And I'm like, like we're all exchanging for more than 600 years now. I mean, Columbus, and they were all already traveling the world. And so sometimes I find it interesting how I didn't perceive that until I came to London. And only here, with all this beautiful mixture, I started to realize we are already all mixed up to a point of not being able to separate this, and yet it seems still to be important to hold these constructs. So maybe within the questions that we ask in the podcast, that would be, how do you think of power and privilege? Because in a way we are making the difference by making this construct.
Well, I really appreciate the richness of what you've just said. Okay, so I'll just respond to some of your points and I'll answer your question. I just wanted to give a reference to that lovely experience you had coming to London and seeing these resonances across cultures. And there was a wonderful moment before we started recording where you sang a local regional song and I sang a local regional song, when these two European songs which were very actually aligned. So that's interesting. Also, doffing my cap to your point about engaging with these differences in London, commonalities, finding that, and that's Gestalt theory, right? Contact happens when there is difference.
Yes.
If we deny or just pretend there's no difference, it can be less contact. It's I'm here and I'm meeting you in my difference.
Yeah.
Right at the heart of our theory. Power and privilege. I mean, I heard a very. The most powerful, resonant description of privilege for me is one I heard by the neuropsychologist Rick Hansen, where he said, privilege is the privilege of not having to think about certain things. And as he described it, it resonated for me. As a white man, I've had the privilege of not having to contend with a whole host of issues, of obstacles, of hindrances that people who were gendered differently from me and from different places, who appear different to me, have had to experience that I haven't. So I think it's important to hold that awareness of difference, to become aware of my privilege, because I guess the slight risk in the complete emphasis on contact and hey, the melting pot, and let's all be cool and we're all the same, is that you miss that. And as a white man, I'd be in danger of missing the ways in which I have privilege over others. So
And I'm curious in that inquiry about the difference. What was maybe for you the biggest moment of friction in the difference, where you were like, "Ooh, seems so foreign to me that it's almost difficult to be contactful with that"?
So in my life, what has been?
Yeah, it can be both in your life and your practice. What first comes to mind?
I think one of the biggest experiences I had of difference were when I was younger. I lived in China for a few years after I graduated from university, and I taught at a university out there, and I ended up staying and ended up writing for an English language newspaper for a while in Taiwan, and it became a whole thing. And after the initial whoa of arriving in China, it was actually a very, very growthful and a very profound experience for me, and a very connective one. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of interesting overlap for me between Italian culture and Chinese culture. For me, the biggest, most striking example of difference, which I still feel viscerally now, was coming back from China and having had these extensive, incredible experiences, and then being back in England and boom. And it's without anybody, finding it very hard to articulate what I'd experienced, or finding someone who's able to understand it. I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which is a children's book by C.S. Lewis, where these children, they enter into a wardrobe and they enter into another world, and then they come back out of the wardrobe and everything's normal again. And it was like that. It was like literally like I've had this experience of complete otherness, and now I'm back here. That is difference. That is and I can still feel it viscerally here.
Yeah.
And that informs my therapeutic practice, in that I would hope it gives me an insight into what I believe is a story we all carry to some degree. In my experience, I think we all have certain aspects of our lives which are, wow, all this has happened to me and I haven't quite found anybody who fully gets it. So that striking experience of difference is a real impetus for me to try and reach into the world of another and understand those places in their lives, because I know what it feels like.
Actually, therapy did come to my mind. As you were speaking about this experience, because COVID was almost like my inner travel to China. Because I mean, although we weren't able to go anywhere, I felt like I went to so many places inside, and suddenly I came out of that closet, and yeah, I am different, and I'm still relating to the same people I was relating before. And almost like I would be like, just you all go to therapy, please. Like, it's so cool. There's so much there. Almost like that kind of feeling like, can you do this so I can share it with you kind of thing.
Wow. That's so poignant.
Yeah, so there is something about when we do those kind of leaps or
external or internal journeys,
let's call them like that. Yeah, I guess there is something about the people that are in our intimate vicinity. There is something about, can you do this as well now, so that we can actually and then I guess that the question that comes for me always there is like, how much things are experiential, and how much, no matter how much I would tell them, unless they have had a felt sense, there is words are just not doing it justice. And yeah, I guess what I'm curious is, like, for you, what's the relation between the experience and words, and how do you put them together?
I just need to pause right now, because I'm resonating with you so much right now, right internally here. My resonometer is like, woo, off the scale. So I just want to acknowledge the impact of what you've just said. Because I think it's important to bear witness to what you've said. That really landed with me. And I'm really appreciating you sharing that.
Can I maybe ask for how it landed? What did it touch?
I just feel this very, very powerful inner sense here, and it's almost like kind of sparks are flowing out, and it's there's a shared sense. I don't know if I guess I'm answering your question because I'm struggling for the words.
Yes.
But when you describe the non-verbal, what possible words which may feature in the field are shared sense of the human, connection, kinship.
Oh yeah.
That's coming up for me.
Yeah.
They're not quite there to capture what's happening now, but they're in the ballpark.
Yeah. That's a very interesting thing about words. As again, as we discussed, I am interviewing in different languages, and
wow,
I'm in different therapeutic languages. We discussed about Jung, transactional analysis, Gestalt, and often, there is a sense of sadness, of lost in translation, and it's joy and sadness because I hold them all, and yet because it's so rich, I would love others to hold it as well. Not in aggressive sense, but more like so beautiful to have that. Because there is, I recently sent to someone, there is a beautiful text of Bosnian, or ex-Yugoslavian Nobel laureate in literature. And I mean, it's just, he's the most wonderful stylist of words that I've ever read.
What's his name?
Ivo Andrić. In Serbian.
Wow.
Yeah. But then as soon as I read his sentence in English, I'm just like, yeah. So I understand that maybe even people who are listening to us will have something lost in the translations of what we are trying to trying to describe as our experience.
Yeah, I mean the resonometer is like it's high again. Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that in, Alexandra. It's a very rich point. 2 images come to mind for me. One is when I was doing my Italian A-level at an English school, and it was taught by an Italian teacher, and she was very, very passionate about the literature, and off her own back on a Sunday she'd organize extra sessions for free. She'd just say, look, no, you guys really need to get this, and we'd study Dante, on a Sunday, and we'd go and she'd read it to us in this wonderful, Florentine, pristine Italian, and I really got I understood it in a way I couldn't have just thinking of it purely in text terms. There was the somatic poetry of it, but the other thing which I was very privileged to experience, and this maybe again could raise interesting ideas about privilege, but I was very lucky in that when I was training in Gestalt, a very, very sweet thing for me was that one of my fellow trainees was Italian. And in therapy training, we practice in triads or more. And so the therapist and client are practicing and they're being observed. And there were a couple of times when I worked with them and we just thought, I think it was the Difference and Diversity weekend, and we thought, hey, let's just do this in Italian. And 2 things about that. One, the observers didn't speak Italian, and yet they were profoundly impacted by it. And the other was the real sense of meeting I felt in those moments. And it accesses a different part of me in the felt sense. And sometimes I've worked with Italian clients, and I work with them in Italian with my English accent, but there's a different sense, bodily sense. There's a different experience when you're speaking a different language. So I'm very interested in you conducting these interviews in other languages and what that's like, and the service you're providing in doing that.
Yeah, no, for me, I have done with the same person in 2 languages.
Wow.
And it was a beautiful experience because I could see, oh wow, I am speaking to a different person almost. It was just it was incredible to observe that difference, because it's also, I guess it's the field we are organizing around when we are speaking a language is also bringing up different parts of our ground and making it figural, like. And I think that's something that's for me quite interesting to observe. And how I am I am different in different languages, and now I've changed my therapist from a Serbian one to an Spanish English speaking, and I'm noticing, oh my God, I'm frustrated. There are these subtleties I just can't bring in English, and I've been trained in English in science.
Okay.
And that makes a huge difference. Because the scientific language is very direct, very reductionist, very to the point. And it's like I've been basically laser sharpened to be a critical thinker in English. Exactly. And now suddenly, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's a very, very interesting experience. Also, like in my Gestalt training, it somehow... I feel like I often feel like, am I coming across? Which part of me is coming in, and I'm speaking in English, and even as an observer, how do I deliver feedback? Am I delivering it as a scientist? So there are many, many, many things that I think come into play here. So it is really interesting. But I actually there was something about what you were saying. Again, an Italian boy in London and the white privilege of a white man, but then the gender then comes into play, and I was curious, how do you hold gender as a category? Because recently, it's interesting for me, it was quite figural for me to think about gender. And suddenly now it came back into the ground. And so I'm wondering, how do you hold that? And did you have different way of holding it in different stages of your life?
It's a very interesting question, because I think, similar to you, it becomes figural and ground at different times. And in some ways, it's not something I've had to think about that much, in terms of, a lot of my experiences in life were, for a long time, I was a primary school teacher, and I trained in psychotherapy, and often these were environments where I was in a minority as a man.
Yeah.
So it's not something I really thought about that much. It's only through having discussions with people who have different contexts, and so I have rich conversations with women who work in the medical profession and are actually outnumbered in gendered terms, and I only fully became aware of, oh wow, there's a kind of privilege that being a man in those environments carries, where I think I didn't really encounter that as much in the environments I was in. Equally, I think privilege is not having to think about certain things. Again, if we come back to that, and there's some very striking... It's become figural for me more recently in just those... through the process of self-education around the impact of gender, and there's studies that show, which are quite haunting when to learn about them, that statistically they did language analysis. Men will fill a conversation more than women. Men interrupt more than women. The incredible study they did on the orchestras in America in the 70s, and there was just a higher number of men than women. And when they started doing blind auditions, the numbers just started evening up. So I think it's through self-education and just being aware of... It's not, and I guess it's not an entirely level playing field between men and women to start with. So I'm very sensitive to, hold on, am I interrupting here? Am I cutting in when I'm working with a female client? am I giving enough space? But equally, and if I can also expand the discussion out a bit, and looking at privilege from the other definition of to be privileged, to be fortunate enough. I'm also very privileged to work with male clients in which we are, as two men, we are unpicking some of this stuff. And we're kind of sifting. Go, okay, well, what does it mean to be a man? And I'm broadening the discussion out beyond your question, but what does it mean to be a man? How are we maybe closing things down, or have we closed things down? But also, there's privilege in being a man, but there are also constraints that my maleness has given me. And how can we find a way out of that, or broaden the room in terms of the capacity to feel, or be more emotional, be more in touch with our interior lives?
Yeah, I guess there is there are gendered roles which are equally constricting for both men and women.
Yeah.
If we are to follow what has been given from the outside without actually exploring who we are on the inside, and I guess for me always the question is not what it means to be a man or a woman, is what it means to be a man for me in my body, or what does it mean to be a woman for me? Because I might be completely different than another woman in what I need to express as a female. And I guess it can be equally, I guess you just said it, that it's really important to unpick and exactly, and to sieve out and just choose what really is resonating inside, I guess. On that note, actually, what has maybe been for you as a man something that you maybe didn't have an awareness, but was actually not helping you, not supporting you, but actually you accepted it as a role of a white man that is doing a certain job, and yet it was not something that you have done from an awareness. It was more like an out of awareness thing that you were just complicit with, and then you were like, oh, wait.
I mean, to your point about these things that are around us, I think we carry them within, and I think even as someone who benefited from, I'd say, access to quite a wide spread of emotions in my upbringing and through my multicultural background, I've always become aware of just that innate sense as a man, the ghosts of shame around vulnerability. It's that sense of, whoa, okay, what? Where did this come from? But there's that, oh, can I lean into this? Is it even possible to be vulnerable? And out of awareness feeling of, oh, I'll be judged if I'm being vulnerable here. I'll be seen as weak. Those are some of the things that, in my experience, and a lot of men I know who do any sense of deep work, they're going to rub up against that one.
I mean, I can say I held that mirror for many men of like, I need you to be strong for me. And I'm already only recently noticing, like as we discussed about this picture of
your lovely picture. Can we just give some props? World YouTube, can we just acknowledge Alexandra's piece of art here?
Thank you.
Lovely.
But I guess what I wanted to touch upon is integrating that part that will be holding my vulnerability, but an inner part that is holding my vulnerability, not the constant expectation that there will be a strong man on the outside that I can fall apart with. Whereas that is an important thing, and it's something that I would still like to be able to do, but that's not a role that has to be fixed. That is something that can flow in between us, and can also be, in a way, how would you say, expanded to have more sources of support in those places, where it's not everything on this one bond, which is kind of closed in a romantic relationship. So I guess yeah, in this whole process, it was really interesting for me to realize how much we gendered so many roles, but also how much we put on romantic relationships, and how much we can easily outsource is a bad word, but outsource from that.
No, I think it's a good word.
Yeah.
I think it's opposite. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also something in, just to come back at you on that one, on to collapse the distinction of strength in vulnerability.
Yes.
It's not either or. They're actually, they feed each other.
Yes.
For me.
Thank you for that.
Have you discussed this work of art before? Would it be worth you just telling us a bit about this?
I was hoping to eventually write a text about it, but yes, I do want to say something about it. It's I actually it feels really private to share it. It's the first time I have publicly showed it, except to my friends. So,
well, I'm honoured.
But I think it's interesting. When I finished it, it felt like it's been a work of 33 years. Because it is my first painting, and it felt a lot of history, current story, like past, present, and future is in it somehow. And as I said, in Serbian it has something a name, something along the lines, but it's kind of, it's rhyming, but it's something along the lines of the she who is circling and he who is holding that. And as I told you, it's also United Kingdom, and it actually, there was a stage of the painting, because it has many layers, where it was blue, white, and red. And interestingly, Serbia also has blue, white, and red. So there is a lot of the process of, I guess, individuation in it, integration of really some past traumas, which were really kind of open wounds, really big open wounds. It's very interesting. When I finished it, it felt like I don't know. I really felt like when it was done, something in me has aligned, and alignment is really the right word. And also there is an interesting thing. The first time I drew a tree with my eyes closed, it didn't have roots almost. So I was cutting my roots off, and my therapeutic process was not going up and reaching for the sky, was really going deep down into the, well, you can call it underground, you can call it however, and really connecting to the down, so I can grow up. So it was, there is a lot. I think there is a lot of symbolism in also in those symbols, in the presence of the sun and the moon. And actually, I discovered a new color that was an interesting. I just had a mix of white and green, which turned out to be this amazingly beautiful turquoise, which somehow became something I didn't even know exists, but it was there. So there was also something about expansion, in the sense of how do you add something new in a non-traumatic way, not forcefully.
Wowzers.
So yeah, there's quite a lot. How much time do you have? The kind of thing. But eventually, yeah, I think I will hopefully. It might even be a book. I don't know. I'm sitting with a lot. I wake up because my bed is just behind where we're recording. I wake up every morning looking at it.
What a lovely way to start the day.
Yeah. I'm curious about how it impacts you. What did it speak to you before I told you the story, and how did the story shape now how you're looking at it?
What I had was an intuitive sense of curiosity, which was a little, which I experienced as a little spark here, saying, "Hey, there's 3 of us here."
It's true.
There's 3 of us here, and I'd like to bring you in. and so now I feel the answer is in your answer, because I feel a real appreciation for what you've just shared, actually. And I feel it's really grounded our conversation. I mean, a lot of the themes we're alluding to and touching on, difference, meeting points, integration, it's here in a very powerful, visceral way. And I'm really appreciating the loveliness of... I discovered a new colour. I didn't know it was there, but hey, it was there all along, I think you said. Finding novelty, growth through contact with the new, which is at the heart of Gestalt therapy. So I'm really appreciating you and your creativity and your answer. So
thanks for asking. Actually, that's another thing that I appreciate, and I was lacking for a lot of my life, is being asked about my experience. And obviously it's coming more and more now. It's probably a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I asked myself, but
nice.
It's yeah, but it's really valuable for me that you are curious in that, and in what it means for me. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, sure. It's a pleasure. I mean, Irving Polster, everyone's life is worth a novel, right? And
it's my favorite.
Yeah. So I feel more connected to you through... Does it have a name? Would you be willing to tell us the name of your artwork? Or
that's what I felt like United Kingdom is.
Well, that's good, because I was thinking that, but that just seems so opposite.
Yeah.
United Kingdom, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my Gestalt supervisor once told me, I don't know, she told me about a sentence. I'm going to make a mistake in who I'm quoting, but I think she said Benjamin Franklin. He said, "We are either going to hang in together, or we are going to hang separately." So there is something about unity that's really important for us, for our survival.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about Gestalt. We brought in Gestalt quite on and off. And I'm wondering, what's your Gestalt story? How did you get attracted to Gestalt?
Yeah, so I always had a sense that I'd eventually train to become a therapist, and in a guidance around that. But I wanted to get some life experience, hence the living in China, the teaching, some media work, some music. But when it was time to train, it was like, okay, I'm really going to shop around and I'm going to do workshops in the different modalities. And I had an idea about what I was going to do. But my somatic sense had a different idea. So I did a few different weekend workshops, and I did the one on Gestalt. It was like, oh wow, hey, I'm really resonating with this. There's an immediate whoa. There was a bodily sense of, this is the one. Yep, this is the one, and I couldn't quite cognitively understand it at the time, but my Gestalt training gave me the answer. It's like my gut feeling was right. It was. I had developed myself in a number of ways, especially cognitively, intellectually, emotionally. But the Gestalt emphasis on body and on integration was what I needed. And it's been a great privilege for me to train in it and practice it. Yeah. So gut feeling is the short answer. Yeah.
And I'm curious, I actually didn't ask this question before, but what do you think are set of events or an event of high gravity that might have shaped who you are?
High gravity?
Well, as in, like, if you would remember, you would remember it with like quite strong
I think there's a number of different moments where I have felt a profound connection between myself and the wider world. So there is listening to the music of Stevie Wonder. So, wow. Whoa. There is periods in my life where I've had a real deep sense of spiritual connection. That wow to the world. There is performing and playing music in front of others. I remember doing that a number of times, and with other musicians. I think the musical performance has been the one, really, playing and singing. Yeah, that's really been very shapeful, because something happens that wasn't there before, like your color, So that contact with the new. I think that answered your question.
I find it really wonderful to witness how you are as you're talking about music, and as you enter that field, and it's suddenly like a whole body experience.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a whole body experience, and which is, and I'm really appreciating you seeing that and getting that, and I feel you feeling me on that, because for me the connection I feel and have felt with music is the same thing I experienced with Gestalt therapy. I think it was Nietzsche who said music is the highest form of art. And I would add to that, humbly, that in my opinion, Gestalt therapy is the therapy that's closest to music. That's for what it's worth. With all due respect to my friends and colleagues in the other modalities.
And what do you think was maybe one of the most challenging moments for you in Gestalt therapy?
I wouldn't say it's a challenging moment. It's been a challenging series of moments and a theme which has recurred, which is a slight sadness I have around the fact that I don't think Gestalt therapy is as widely out there and understood in the world as it could be. And that's not a, hey world, you need to understand Gestalt therapy. I'm on my soapbox. It's more, I really feel from a heartfelt place that Gestalt therapy has a lot to offer the world, and I think it could be out there more. There's a number of different examples of that. When I engage sometimes beyond Gestalt therapy, sometimes Gestalt therapy, there's that caricature of, oh yeah, it's the two-chair work. I would beg to disagree. It's something which places the human relationship at the core of its work. And also something that has happened to me repeatedly is I've engaged a lot with the wider literature on trauma, and we're so fortunate to be living in a time where our understanding of trauma and growth, post-traumatic growth, is flourishing. But time and time again, across the board, I engage with trauma literature or speakers talking about trauma, and their ideas are completely compatible with Gestalt therapy. And Gestalt therapy won't be mentioned, and they're not stealing, but right in the origins of Gestalt therapy, they're talking about working with the body. Okay, New York Times bestseller, Body Keeps the Score. It was right there back in 1951 in the origins of our therapy, working phenomenologically, understanding through gentle process and dialogue the other. I mean there's some wonderful work being done on this, and there's some great writing on Gestalt therapy and how it can aid trauma work, and Miriam Taylor's done wonderful work on this, and so on. Lynn Jacobs references it beautifully, and a host of other writers. But a book I don't think I'll get round to writing, a project, is the implicit gestaltness of trauma work. It's not just like, oh, hey, yeah, that kind of works. It's like, this is right from the heart of our approach. And it's kind of, occasionally it's referenced, but here we are. Gestalt therapy came out in 1951, and it's all in there. And it was there already ready. And I go on courses around embodiment, and I say I'm a Gestalt therapist, and people say to me, I don't know what that is. Body practitioners. So that's a source. That's a source of sadness for me. I think we can get the message out there more, maybe like through YouTube interviews or hey.
Yeah, there is an interesting thing there for me where I have almost the opposite experience.
Wonderful.
Where
Bring it
I'm
on.
like, why do we need to gestaltify everything? And where I'm coming from, almost is like, I adore the psychoanalytic theory, and we discussed the Jungian work, and even TA. And actually, what I didn't appreciate before I started interviewing, how much I love constructivist theories. And then I realized, often, that this famous metaphor of touching the elephant, and everyone is kind of describing something different, but they are actually all touching the same thing. And I'm just thinking that what that is forcing me to do is to then again differentiate myself rather than unify. Whereas what my experience is coming, I actually, even before I knew to put name of Gestalt, I named these things for myself. Even before someone told me there is a window of tolerance, I have had an embodied sense of my nervous system, and I was like, there's an overwhelm in the nervous system. If this happens, I feel it like I'm cut off of my feelings. I even had theories in my head, like how when someone, like, you know, gets electrified, like the strong electric shock on the body, which is basically trauma, where it's like there is too much current passing, which you have no capacity, if we just talk in physical terms as a scientist.
That's a great definition, yeah.
And so I had all the time this thinking, and then suddenly, yes, someone has given them words, but they are actually the human experience. And then it kind of leads me back to power and privilege, which is I'm just writing the first sentence of my essay is actually, knowledge is a story that survived, or the story that helps us survive. And
wow,
that's where I'm kind of thinking how much we are contributing to power and privilege by trying to because then we are just propagating a story of 3 men who have written this book and have named really important things. I don't want to dismiss the work of so many people before me, and it's not where I'm coming from. I appreciate and I read all of them, and I take what I need. But then I'm thinking is, why is then their words, their way of saying it, somehow more important than another person's way of saying it? And so those are the things that I'm sitting with, and without excluding that I would also want Gestalt therapy to be more into the public, and I would also want, more of what I would want, not even being in the public, but more of people actually having an experiential, embodied experience of the kind of therapy we are doing, which is not, anyways, no matter how many books we write, we are not going to be able to transmit that. So that's where I'm kind of in that difference, maybe. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot in that. I mean, firstly, and to your point about the 3 men, that's helpful for me to clarify, because firstly, there's a source of sadness in the fact that I think the contribution of Laura Pearl's has been
exactly
massively lost to a degree. And she was, as far as I can understand, right in there with her emphasis on dance, slow body process, and that's been lost a bit. So yeah, I don't think I was saying it's just the 3 guys who wrote the book. There is also a really important point you're making about, the elephant point. It's like, the studies show the type of therapy doesn't make that much of a difference on effectiveness. It's the quality of the relationship, which makes the difference, really, in the therapeutic outcomes. I think, and I like your emphasis on going. I think I'm hearing an emphasis on going broader. I think the only point I would make is that there's something in Gestalt therapy which places a very moving emphasis on the relationship between 2 people.
Yeah.
Especially the dialogic stuff. And yeah, I think that's... It's like when you're really into a band and they're making great songs and they're not out there as much. It's like, hey, there's a lot of great music out there, but there's this album they made and I think you'd really like it.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's exactly, I mean, and I share that feeling for Gestalt.
Yeah.
Even though I've made that reference before, but I do feel like, obviously that's why I've chosen this to be my core modality. And
that's a nice way of looking at it.
And also I think there is a really beautiful rich literature, which I'm loving it since the time I first touched it. And so I guess there's what this reminds me of is I'm about to go to that show, but I've heard how it looks like. So there is a show which is called, like, it's immersive theater, and so you enter, and it's kind of I think it's on several floors. I haven't been, so I can't say, but just from what I heard, and you enter and you can choose whether you follow one storyline and one actor, or you go into different floors and you explore different pieces of the story. And then I realized, oh my God, there are so many stories on so many levels running at the same time. And obviously we are just one human being, limited in what stories and which actors we can, which lines of storytelling we can follow. And
Wow.
And that show kind of really emphasized for me, well, the complexity of life, and how it's important to hold lightly, basically, the storyline we have chosen to follow, because in that we are definitely excluding some parts of reality. In any given moment, which is pragmatic, beautiful, and human. But it's just, for me, I'm always holding that complexity, and it always kind of, at times it was even stopping me from writing, because it's like, which storyline I choose even from my own head, and how is that going to, define. Yeah. So I think there are those things that I'm always curious about, again, pragmatically knowing that this is like, we have to take things and make them figural so that we can complete a certain cycle, and then but
it's worth pausing over your words there and chewing on them a bit, because I really enjoyed you you expanding there and explaining that. I think you, as far as I get it, you're talking about, hey, sometimes we have to do that.
Yes.
But, well, hey,
exactly.
There's also that.
Exactly. And that's the polarity. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I appreciate your attentiveness to my words. It just feels exactly like we discussed. This is what I feel.
Yeah, thank you. The dialogic figure of 8.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you're bringing a lot of richness to this conversation too, so thank you.
And then what do you think were maybe some of the most beautiful, nourishing moments of you in Gestalt, and you and Gestalt, or however you want to phrase it?
For me, it has to be the moments of meeting. The I thou moments. Which I have experienced as a client, and I've experienced as a therapist. The moments of, hey, I see you, and you see me, and here we are. And we're not the same, but boy, are we really connecting right now in a really heartfelt place. And it can be in moments of conversation, it can be in moments of shared laughter, it can be in moments of sadness, it can be in moments of silence. And sometimes the moments are quite long, and sometimes the moments are a spark of whoop. And for that moment of, hey, here we are. Isn't this something?
Yeah. I can relate to that. Yeah.
I kind of feel we might have dipped into one just then. Well, felt like that over here anyway.
Yeah. And do you feel like there is a Gestalt community?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. To me, the answer to that is the question. Well, what do we mean by community? And I mean, a community can be experienced with two people. For me,
Yeah.
it's like this feels like a little community of three right now. So for me, community, I really experience it as moments of profound connection. And to your earlier point about I think perhaps if there's an emphasis on Gestalt community within Gestalt, then we're missing out on the possibility of connections across modalities.
And I'm also curious about, you mentioned your experience as a client, and not many people actually talk about their experiences as a client. So it just came to me that maybe something I want to invite in the conversation, and you can share whatever it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, I have been very fortunate to experience some very holding, supportive moments as a client. And I absolutely understand why trainee therapists should. I'm always wary of using the word should, but I'll go with should have therapy themselves, and touch base with their own therapeutic support as and when it's needed, because those experiences have informed me. And there have been times when I've been a client, and it's happened with a number of different people and all of them are people I hold very dear to my heart. And I have felt really supported and understood. I think it's Dan Siegel's phrase, the felt sense of being felt. And those moments are very precious. And I've been very, very fortunate to experience those. And something happens in those moments. So, wow. Hey, you really get me. Firstly, I can feel you're trying to get me, but you get me.
Yeah.
Beyond even what you're saying, I can feel you getting me.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's...
You start getting yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
Or I would add, oh, phew. It's not just me who does the getting myself.
Yeah. Ah, yes.
Oh, phew, that's a relief.
Yeah.
There's someone else.
Oh, yeah.
There's someone else who gets it.
And that's so precious.
And we're back to Bruce Springsteen and the radio.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's someone out there beyond me who gets me. Wow. And that, precious.
And I'm wondering, what's your involvement in Gestalt therapy, and how do you see the future of Gestalt therapy?
I think I'm excited by the possibilities of Gestalt therapy, because Gestalt therapy at its heart has an emphasis on holism. So it's this emphasis on integrating the spiritual, the physical, the cognitive, the ecological. And we're there again, right? So I think and I think increasingly we're faced with a number of crises and challenges in our worlds, and I think increasingly people are realizing that this is not working, and that deep appreciation of breadth. And I think Gestalt therapy can speak to that. And I think there's an exciting possibility of growth in the realm of the ecological. And again, Miriam Taylor is starting to do this in her work, where she references the support and connection to the natural world, which is something that clock's ticking, you know. We can't let that slide anymore. So the future of Gestalt therapy has to encompass that, I think. Yeah.
So I think we can slowly wrap up, and I'm just wondering, is there a question that I haven't asked, but you maybe would like to ask yourself, and I kind of really missed it?
I'm appreciating that question. Something came to mind for me when we hit on my emphasis on Gestalt therapy as the music of the therapies and the resonance with therapy. So the question could be, Anthony, could you say a bit more about that? And there was a very profound moment I had recently when I was watching an interview with Sting, and he was talking about the structure of those classic songs. And there's a very clear parallel with how Gestalt therapy works. In terms of, in Gestalt, we gently explore patterns as a way of bringing in the new. And he was saying he finds certain amount of modern music is just repeats around a certain patterns, but he was taking it back to classic music and the structure of those classic songs, which start with the pattern but then bringing in the new. So that's an answer I'd like to give. And there's a lovely example he gave of, okay, classically, verse, my baby left me, chorus, I'm lonely, verse, my baby left me, chorus, I'm lonely. And then the bridge comes in and it's different chord structure. And then there's a possibility of like, oh, well, hey, well, maybe they're not the only person for me, and maybe there's other people out there. And that leads into the coda, and hey, actually things aren't so bad. And I think there's such a parallel between the genius of those 3.5 minute songs and what happens in Gestalt therapy. We're going to look at these patterns, we'll hang out in them, and hey, we can find a bridge, and then we can go to the chord change. So that came up for me, and I really wanted to share that. So thanks for letting me get that in there. That's the coda. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's I love the metaphor that you created for yourself. That it's very rich and alive somehow, and also I think speaks to the experience, the embodied experience of both music and Gestalt you have. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
it's been really lovely to sit with you and to share myself with you, and to also to learn from you. There's actually been a joyful quality about, for me, this sharing. So thank you.
Thank you.